So you've gotten yourself a Spektrum radio and you're using it, but you're finding there's so much stuff in here and these menus and things, you just find it all confusing. Well, I'm here to clear the air and to help you work that out. Now, we got a separate video for people that are just getting started. So if you're just getting started, hey, this is more than what you want to be getting digested right now. Go back to that other video and see the very basics. But if you're ready to go that next step and see just how you do different things, well, this video is for you. Now, first off, before we go any farther, you want to make sure that you have the latest software, the firmware. So as you, when you turn it off, it'll show it to you up in the corner. But also you can go down to your system setup and go to the bottom here, and you got the About Regulatory, and you've got the version number down there. Okay, so 4.01a is what I'm using right now. By the time you're watching this, there might be something more recent. They come out pretty regular. But make sure that you've updated your firmware. And if you're not sure about that, see our video where we talk about increasing the number of channels on your radio. And that video is one that will show you how to update the firmware. So, having done that, we'll then show you a shortcut to getting started with one of the items. If you want to go straight into System Setup, hold in your button, press on the logo, keep it held down until it gets started, and then you let up in this and it goes you straight into System Setup. You can get to the same place if you're going from the main screen. You press in the button and you scroll down to System Setup. Okay? But it's very important to realize that there's two main menus in here. There's your function list and there's your System Setup. Those two things. Okay, so before we get into selecting a model, it's a good thing to always have some planes that are as templates, that if you have something similar, you can start with a lot of stuff already done. So if you go down to Model Utilities down here in the same menu, System Setup menu, and we want to export as a template, so we're already in our Bixler, which is a sailplane, sort of a powered sailplane, I guess. So the first thing we want to do is pick the folder as being the templates folder, so it'll be in the place where it is. So it's a template folder. It's internal. We're all ready to go. Import, export. So let's go then to the options here, and we're going to export model, so just one. Okay. This is where we can give it a name. So we get to where the name is highlighted. Then we can go down here and it's just going to replace the letters that are there. So I'll go to lowercase and just picking the letters that we want along the way. Sailplane. And what I'm going to do is just put in a space, and then I'm going to delete the space. Okay, so that's that. So now I can go back. Okay, and having given the name, I now say to export it. I've already told it where. So hit that a couple of times. Okay, so that's all done now. So having done that, if I go to create a new model, I come here to Model Select, and I say Add New from Template, I can actually go down here to that sailplane that I've just created, pick that as a template, and say, yeah, I want to import that one. I like that. So then it imports it from the memory. And so there I'd have Bixler. Okay, it had the name Bixler. To our system setup. disable the RF, model select. So we got two Bixlers, and that's because I just created a duplicate, and the duplicate had the name that was the same as the name that I had before. And so now I can go in there and I can update the name to be whatever I want it to be, and let's just add a 2 on the end of it. So I go here to this little thing, go over to the last letter, and so now I'm going to call that Bixler 2. Okay, so that's our model name. Okay, so I think you've already be familiar with the aircraft type and all of that. You know, I've gone through this on your on the basic sort of video, but it has to do with how many channels are being used for each of these functions. So pick between wing and tail. So that's all straightforward. And we've gone through this flight mode setup. So just go down there. Decide, okay, I want to pick a switch, and so flick the switch. That picks that particular switch, hit enter, that goes in there. Where you might use multiple switches is where you're doing different things. So it might be that one switch is being used for the aileron mode, another one is being used for the elevator mode. I don't know why you'd want to do that. Might be other things that you might do, but for me I just simply use the one. So we get out of that, spoken flight mode, what it's going to say, channel assignments. Okay, so we got 10 channels on this first screen, that's cool. We go down to next, and 20 channels? Well, not really. As you go down here to 14, you can see we're able to highlight the items there, but I click it once more, and it pops away all the way down to the bottom. So NX6 or the NX7E, it's only going to give you 14 channels. If you have an NX8 or an NX10, then you'll have the full 20. So we've got that, but let's now have a look at the frame rate. Now this is a little bit different as to how this works. RF mode automatic. You don't want DSM2, that's horrible. So keep it on automatic. But here in servo mode, you've got several options here. Now let's go back first off to hybrid. Hybrid, that's not 11 channels at 22 milliseconds. That's channels at either 11 milliseconds or 22. So if you've got digital servos, you can have digital servos on your basic flight controls, aileron, elevator, rudder, and flaps. Those can all have digital servos running at 11 milliseconds, and then the other ones can be running at 22 milliseconds, whether they're digital or whether they're analog. So that gives you 10 channels with high resolution, and then a couple more channels that would have, well, not available. It just gives you 10 channels, sorry. So you got 10 channels that way. That's the hybrid. Then you've got 12 channels at 22 milliseconds plus 8 channels with variable frame rate. So with this one, you've got 12 channels at 22 milliseconds. Oops, let me just select that, 12 at 22, press in there. Okay, so you got the 12 channels at 22. Then you got 13 and 14 with variable, and if you had an NX8 or 10, then you'd have the additional ones at variable. But 12 channels, 22, 2 channels that are variable, even though it says 8 up there, but 2 for this particular one. Okay, going back up to the choices here, then the last choice is 14 channels at 22 milliseconds. So if either you have all analog servos, or if you just don't care and you just want all 14 channels to have decent resolution to do flight control type things with, then you can have all 14 that particular way. So if you are going to use one of those other channels, so let's say it's going to be used for, you know, stability or something like that, you would go to that particular channel that you're going to use. So let's say this auxiliary 7 I want to use for the stability. I'd hit enter there, and then I'd flick the switch that I'm going to use to control that. So that's saying it's going to be switch B that does it. Hit enter, and now channel 7 is on our stability control to whether it's, you know, just in stabilized mode or safe mode, you know, whatever it might be used for that channel. And so let's say we're using channel 8 to indicate how much stability. Ideally, we'd like to have the dial up here on the top to do that, but NX6 doesn't have that. But what I might do is select this particular thing here and switch this switch F up there to put F in there, select that, and then have different settings on these 3 positions for 3 different levels of stability control. And that at least gives me a little bit of an ability to do some altering while I'm flying. When you don't have that dial on there, it is difficult as you're going to fly if you have to go up there, wiggle, you know, get it going fast, wiggle the stick and see whether you get some jerking taking place, and, you know, if it's got too much stability control, have to bring it back, make adjustments, send it up again, and so forth. So if you can have something that allows you to some little changes, that's better than not having anything. So that's a type of thing that you do with channel assignments. Okay, we go back, trim setup. This is just simply how far each click of the trim is going to take you. It's saying 5 points at a time, so you can increase that or decrease that depending on how much you like to click the thing. Model utilities, we've already been there as far as exporting as a template, but this is also where you would delete a model, copy a model, various things like that. So one alternate to using the template sort of thing is you could come in here, copy a model, and then use the copy to modify and so forth. Warnings, various things that you can be alerted for, you know, your gear flaps, flight mode, that type of thing. Telemetry, you need to be hooked up to your receiver to set this, but this shows you what's already in place. But you hook up to your receiver that has telemetry, and with it bound and active, then you go to auto config, you hit that, and it'll automatically put in here whatever it's receiving back from the receiver. Pre-flight setup, this is just for setting up your list. You can have a list that when you hit the function menu, you go to pre-flight setup, and then it gives you the various items to go through. And so you pick the first item and say, okay, you know, it might be a battery test, you know. And then the second item, you know, might be test controls, you know. Whatever you might have, you put those in there, and they can be reminders for you to make sure you don't miss those things. Frame rate, we've already been in there. Binding, used for binding, you're familiar with that. Serial port setup, don't really need to mess with that. Trainer, we've got a separate video on how to use that. Center tone, you don't need to worry about. Nobody wants a tone, well, I don't anyway, want a tone beeping when it's in the middle. Sound utilities is just basically the categories and things such as that, so it's not something you tend to use. Palette utilities, if you want to have it look pretty, you know, in different colors and stuff like that, you can set up. System setup, not really much to do there, but things like the inactive alarm, how long it's going to take before the thing starts vibrating to tell you that it's been inactive, whether you need to set the time and the date, and whether you need to do a factory reset to start over with everything. That's all in there. Preferences, you got screen brightness. So for example, doing this video, I've got the brightness turned down to 30% because we've got a black background, and otherwise this would be all washed out. So to enable you to be able to see that, we've got the brightness turned down. Obviously you want to turn that back up later. If you go to the next menu, you have the sound options in here. So under volume controls, you got levels of sound. But keep in mind here that also, if you go back to the main menu here, that if I hit the back button on this, I can then change the level of sound just by using the dial. 100% down to, whatever I might want as far as a lower sort of level. So you've got that right there. Okay, back to system setup. Preferences, Wi-Fi utilities, to be able to upgrade your firmware, connecting to your home Wi-Fi network, you can do that. See our video on how to multiply the number of channels on your radio to see how to do the firmware update, but very simple nowadays with the Wi-Fi connectivity. USB settings, this is where you either set up for a flight simulator using the game controller setting there, or if you want to access the files that are inside the radio. So, this one has memory inside the radio. It doesn't have, well, the SD card is optional. That's just sort of moving things back and forth. But actually much easier to just simply plug it into the computer. So when you get to this screen, you plug it into the computer using the USB port on the back. And with it plugged into the computer, you then click on this Access Internal Storage, and then on the computer, the contents of the memory inside the radio will be showing on the computer. Transfer SD card, don't need to worry about that. About regulatory, will give you your serial number for the radio, and it'll also tell you the version of the software that you've got. So that's all system setup. In the function list, most of this you'd be familiar with, but just in case you're not aware, like in the Servo setup, you got the travel there, but there's a lot more. So you highlight the travel, hit enter, then you've got Subtrim. So Subtrim is where when you first build the model, you put it all together. Let's say the ailerons, even by visually looking at them, they're not even. So you can use a subtrim to get them where they look like they're even, get it up and fly it, and then do the fine adjustment with the trim tab. Okay? So that's the type of thing that subtrim is for. You still want to use the linkages to get it as close as you can, but subtrim can be helpful with regard to that. Reverse, if you need to reverse a channel, that's where you do that. But keep in mind, you don't use this to reverse the direction of rotation of an electric motor. If you reverse the throttle on this, what it means is when the stick is down, it's full throttle, and when the stick is up, the throttle is off. So you don't want to do that. But your normal sort of things that you want to reverse, you do it there. Speed, kind of like what happens with your flaps. With your flaps, you got a separate item in the menu to set up the flaps, and it will adjust the speed in the same way as this would. But let's say you had dive brakes on a glider, and you don't want them to instantly go on, you want them to go on slowly. Well, for that particular channel, you'd go to that particular channel, and you would tell it, hey, I want this thing to go slower. Channel name. You got your standard name sort of there. You can name other things differently if you want. Okay, so we got absolute travel. Now what this is, it's very similar to the travel at the start, only this one you're setting the end point, and then you've got a linear movement to get up to that point. With absolute travel, what it is it's just truncating it. It's just chopping off the end of it. So the rate stays the same as what it was before, but where you're limiting the travel, it just chops it off at that point. Now, what about balance? Balance is very similar to mixing. You have a master channel, and then you have one that is being balanced to that. It might be elevators on two servos that are supposed to work together, and you'd set typically the right-hand one as being the master, and then the other one would be the one that is matching it. So you'd set them both up to where they're both level and straight, and you'd use subtrim on the one to match it if necessary. You then move the stick all of the way, the one moves, and then you change the balance value to bring that angle up to be exactly the same. So very similar to mixing, but it's allowing for, you know, making those adjustments in the middle. And okay, rates in Expo, I don't think there's anything I need to tell you there. If you haven't watched the basic video, you might want to just be aware that if you're going to use flight modes on your rates, you start out by setting the switch down here. Before you mess around with the rates at all up there, before you mess around changing the Expo, come down here, click enter on there, select the switch that you want to use for flight modes, and then after you've done that, you can have the switch in each position and set the values that you want for whatever that might be. Throttle cut. With a throttle cut, this is a good place to illustrate what happens with regard to the box being colored in, the big black box around the 0, as compared to the little dot that's below the box. The dot that's below the box is the position that the switch is in. So I've got the switch pushed away. That is in the left position. Switch pushed up towards me, it's in the right position. The colored in box indicates when this thing is active. So when the throttle cut is active, it's on that 0 position, which is, for me, when the switch is away from me. So it's saying when the switch is away from me, that's the position of the switch. The box is colored in, so this is active. Active means the throttle is cut. So the throttle doesn't work in that position. When you bring it back up, the box is clear above the dot, and that says the throttle cut is not active, and that means the throttle works. So as we look at the throttle there, it's working in that position, whereas when I put the switch back there, the throttle is not working. And of course, it's very handy having the channels down here at the bottom. Delay, you certainly don't want that with a throttle cut, and requiring the stick low would be to say you can't cut the throttle unless you've already got the throttle down low. I think that's a bit crazy. You know, if you happen to have it up slightly and you cut it and you think it's safe, all of a sudden it's not safe. So best not to be using those things for throttle cut. Throttle curve, this is just used for helicopters and stuff like that, where you bring up the throttle up to a certain level, and then after it gets at that level, then it stays constant, and while it's constant, it's then moving the collective up using that same stick. So don't need to worry about that for fixed wing aircraft. Analog switch setup is where you're taking an analog channel and you're setting up switches as well with regard to that. Okay, so what this is saying is that as far as using that control as a switch, it would be saying if the aileron is greater than 75%, it's in position 0. If it's between plus 75% and negative 75%, then it's in position 1. And if it's less than 75%, which is over to the right here, then that's position 2. And so it makes it function as a discrete switch instead of being the analog signal. Digital switch is more commonly used, and that's where you want to change values for something. So let's say that for my channel 8 up here, channel 8, it's already working, so you can see down here it's working and it's going to 100, 0, minus 100. Well, let's say I wanted something different than that. So I press enter, I flick the switch to select it, and then let's say with this stability control that I've worked out that I need it to be, well, maybe I want it, well, I can turn it off over here with the stability switch, so I don't need to worry about the minus 100. So let's say I want it just some more fine control. So let's say minus 20 to 0 to plus 20. So I can go in here and put it, we'll eventually get there, minus 20, 0, plus 20. And so that's given me the equivalent of if it was a dial being someplace close to the middle. It's either between minus 20, 0, and plus 20, okay? And so now when I work the switch, I get those values. So I could be using that instead of a dial to get a little bit of fine control with, say, stability, you know, something like that. Logical switch setup. Let's say that you've got flaperons, and of course with flaperons you got your ailerons that work as ailerons, but they also work as flaps. So if the aileron, if you put the flaps on, both ailerons go down, but they still work as ailerons. When the flaps are up, they're straight and they still work as ailerons. But let's say when they're down and they're working as ailerons, you're going to hit the limit on them when they, you know, that particular aileron goes to the down position. So what you might want to do is limit the flaperons to only be active when the flight mode is in the low mode, to where they're not moving so far and you've got room to go down and still be operating. Okay? So I don't know if you'd actually use this for that, but let's use that as an example anyway. Okay, so we go in here and we say, okay, we want to set up a logical switch, and we're going to use flight mode and switch D. So we're using flight mode and switch D. D is my flaps, C is my flight mode. So those are the two switches that we're going to use. Now, to this position when they're both up. When I move the flight mode down, we got that position. When I move it further down, we got it there. But then for each of these positions, we got two more positions that it can be in. So we can then set values for the switch for each of those positions along the way to be able to give different set of values. So I hit enter there, and I've got the function value. Let's see, what can we do? Yeah, okay. So I can now give it a value here for that particular position. So whatever it might be. So that's that particular position minus 18%. And I go down to the next one and hit enter. Then allows me to go down here, hit enter, put in a value, you know. So it's a bit complicated, but essentially each of those allows me to have a different value for this logical switch based on this grid of different switch positions, different combinations of positions. So not something that you'd use very often, but that's what that does. Combo switch setup, rather similar, but it would be the sort of thing to say, okay, this is combo switch 1, so let's say switch 1 is our C for that one. Oops, C, and hit enter. And then, let's see, yeah, so we got that. Relation. So let's say we want switch C to be in this position, and we want flaps to be in that position. Okay. So if switch C is in this position and the flaps is in that one position here, then you see this switch is active. It's like the switch is turned on. But if I put either of these switches in a different position, then you can see the status is inhibit. It's not active. So it means that in that one particular situation where this is true and that's true, if they're both true, it's this and that, then I've got the active switch. So these sorts of things you can just, you know, when you come up with a problem and you think, how on earth do I program that? You know, that's the type of thing that you get into. Flap system, this is more common and straightforward. what you want to do with this when you're going to set up your flaps, you want to start out with small changes. So you can start out with, you know, say minus 15 or something, and position 2 plus 15. Hook it up to your plane and see how far it goes, and then you can start increasing it to get the flaps where you want it. So position 0 for me, that would be with the no flaps, and so I would adjust this after I've got it set up. I got it hooked up to the plane and ready to go. Put that value in there. The flaps probably are down a little bit, so then hit enter on that one, and I just start going down further until I bring them up to that point where they're level. If it's going in the opposite direction, you know, from what you want for the switch, you know, like I want the flaps to be up when that switch is away from me, but if it's going the opposite way, then all I got to do is go positive on this one and bring it to where I want it. So I get that one first. Then I move the flaps down to the mid position, see if that looks okay, adjust it one way or the other. Then the flaps full down position, and then with that one in place, come down here to the position 2 and get that one where I want it. And if it was going that opposite direction, it might be down here somewhere. With the elevator, that is a mixing function that is taking place. So when the flaps are in this position 1, if that's to me is no flaps, then I don't want any elevator to be added with that. When I go to partial flaps, I can play around with how much elevator put in. I can start out with some small amounts here, a little bit for position 1, a little bit more for position 2. And then when I fly the plane, when I go to apply the flaps to position 1, if the plane goes up, well, I need to give it more down elevator. And this elevator here, the positive percentages, that's down elevator. So if it's going up too much, I add in more of this. So it's adding how much of a mix to put in, and so forth for the higher one. Yeah, you set the switch here for the thing. So again, you hit enter and you flick the switch that you want and hit enter. And then here the speed, this is that, just like what we showed you with the servo setup, that's how long it's going to take to move from one position to the other. So I like it nice and slow to make it rather realistic-like and nothing sudden happening. So I've got 3 seconds in there. Okay, mixing is other types of things. You know, you got mixing taking place with the elevator and the flaps, but this is other ones. So let's say you want aileron to rudder. That'd be a common mix that you have, that you're getting a bit of adverse yaw going around the corner. So you're trying to turn left, and the plane, you know, takes a bit of a turn to the right and then sort of slides around the corner. Well, you need to add a little bit of rudder. You can do that with the stick itself, but you can also put a mix in there. So you have to start out by saying whether you want it to be turned on with a switch or just simply be turned on. So we'll just say turn it on. And then being turned on, you then have the ability to say, you know, what sort of percentage, you know, mix you want. So say 12% is going to get added in on the rudder for what happens, you know, 12% of the setting on the aileron is going to get added to the rudder, you know, something like that. So you can have one of the common mixes, or you can set up any other mix that you want. You know, one thing is going to have an impact upon another thing. Sequencer, this would be if you have a separate servo on the doors for the landing gear, the covers that cover over the landing gear as compared to the gear itself. So you want the door to open first and then the wheels. This is where you'd set that up. Range test, of course, you'd be familiar with that. Simply whether it's reduced power or not. So 30 meters, what is happening. Timer, you can have more than one timer. So here we got a timer that's a countdown timer. We set the time there. It's triggered by the throttle stick being over 25%. It's on inhibit for one time, so that's to say that every time that it goes over 25%, the timer is running, and anytime it goes below 25%, the timer will stop, but again, when you put it over 25%, it'll stop again. So it's not a one-time. Okay, when we go to next on the timer, it then allows us to pick what we want. Typically this clear button up here is what's being done, but you could set a different switch to that if you wanted to, to reset the timer. But most likely you just want to use a clear, which is well along in the list there, and you can see that when it clears the time is when it's active, so when it's colored in, and you can see when it pushed the button, then that's active over there. So that's sort of standard for that. Telemetry, you need to have it hooked up to the plane with the receiver bound to the transmitter and with the receiver powered up. And with that being the case, you hit auto config and it will find all of the items that are being sent back in telemetry and give you a list for these things. Audio events, just simply types of things that you want to get told about. Function bar is what is going to happen when you hit the bar over here. So you can set up your list of things to include in that. Bind, naturally, when you bind your transmitter to the receiver. Start trainer, see our video on setting up a buddy box system for the trainer. And of course, system setup, we've been in there. Charge status, letting you know the condition of the battery. And monitor to be able to see the position of the various channels. And of course, with this monitor, you also can get that just simply by dialing to the right on your wheel when you're in the main screen. So to the left, back there, to the right, you get that. So that pretty well takes you through everything that you can do on your NX radio. I trust that that's been helpful. If it has indeed, then make sure that you subscribe if you haven't done so already. Keep these things handy, and then have a look at another helpful video on our site. I'm RC Jim signing off. You have a great day and enjoy your flying.